I'm going to introduce to you something that is revolutionary. Who's heard of the Ginsu knife? What I'm going to introduce to you today isn't going to slice or dice or cut a frozen turkey in half. Who's heard of the ShamWow? The ShamWow, what it does is absorbs liquid 10 times its weight, as well as pick up stains and spills off your carpet. What I'm going to show you today isn't going to do that. Who's heard of the Snuggie? The Snuggie keeps you warm while you have snacks and drinks on your couch while you watch TV, right? What I'm going to show you today isn't going to do that. Who's heard of the magic bullet? Your personal, versatile, kitchen magician, right? What I'm going to show you today is not going to make you a nutritious and delicious smoothie in 7 seconds. What I'm going to show you today will revolutionize your life. What I'm going to show you today will change how you think, feel, talk, and act. What's that I hear? You don't have time for all that? So how long does it take you to stand in line at Mac Hall at Tim Hortons during Roll Up the Rim? How long does it take you to commute to work? How long does it take you to browse Facebook or play Pokemon Go? What I'm going to introduce to you today is a revolutionary product called the E-Crisp. The E-Crisp will help you reduce stigma, will help reduce the stigma of mental illness in others, and will create a caring, supportive community for everybody in as little as 5 minutes a day. Now, you're thinking, how do I use this thing? Right? It's very, very easy to use. You can use the E-Crisp at home, at work, on campus. You can use it while you're driving to work. You can use it while you walk to work. You can use it anywhere, anytime. You can use it in your RV, on your boat. You can use it anywhere you want. The E-Crisp is so useful. You can carry it with you and nobody will know that you're carrying it. The E-Crisp is so easy to use. You can use it in the bathroom while you're taking a shower. You can use it while you are studying, while you're doing whatever. You can use it before you go to bed. You can use it after you wake up. You can use it anytime. And let me remind you, you can use the E-Crisp in as little as 5 minutes a day. Now you must be thinking, how much do I have to pay for this revolutionary piece of technology? How much do you think? Say $99.95. $99.95. You're wrong. How much do you think? $79.95. That's way too much. I can go lower. $59.95? 3 payments of $9.95. The E-Crisp is absolutely free. And if you call now, I'm going to throw in a free gift. The Campus Mental Health Strategy. The Campus Mental Health Strategy will allow you to understand all the resources that exist on campus concerning mental health. We have tons of great services, programming, resources. It will also allow you to understand how the University of Calgary is progressing to improve mental health on campus for all of its community members. And finally, the Campus Mental Health Strategy will allow you to understand how the campus or the university is going to create a caring, supportive campus. So how do you get this revolutionary product? Operators are standing by. Call 1-800-REDUCE-STIGMA now. That's 1-800-555-708-352-9256 extension 1234. Again, that's 1-800-555-708 352-9256, extension 1234. Call now. Operators are standing by. Okay, so that's enough of the silly stuff. Let's move on to the more serious part of today's talk. Valerie, thank you for introducing me. My name is Andrew Szeto. I am a assistant professor in the Department of Psychology. I'm also the director of the campus mental health strategy. For the past 10 years or so, I've been looking at stigma reduction, looking at the stigma of mental illness concerning attitudes, looking at research to bring in more social psychological aspects to reducing stigma. As with my work with the campus mental health strategy, we're doing a lot on stigma reduction as well. And what we've been doing are things such as programming that reduces stigma. We're also looking at things such as awareness through articles, through other things that we're starting to plan, but we have lots of stuff that's coming up in the future that reduces stigma. So my little intro there was a little silly, but what I wanted to do was just inject a little bit of humor, a little bit of satire into the stigma of mental illness. It is a serious topic, but I just wanted to do that. It was also silly, but I also wanted to point out that a lot of the things I said in that beginning are true of stigma reduction. Stigma reduction doesn't take that much effort. It's not that hard. Stigma reduction, you can do it here, there, anywhere. Stigma reduction doesn't cost anything. Stigma reduction as well can take as little as 5 minutes a day. So that's the things that I wanted to highlight in that little beginning part there. So now, again, the tone of the beginning there was a little bit silly, but I do want to acknowledge that mental illness stigma is a very serious issue, and mental illness itself is a very, very serious issue. We have lots of data, for example, at the University of Calgary, pointing to students' mental health. The 2013 and 2016 NCHA data points out that mental illness is a priority for students. As well, for faculty and staff, we have lots of data from HR, from staff wellness, that point to the need for mental illnesses to be a priority for faculty and staff. So we know that all that is going on. Mental illness is also a priority for Alberta, for our country, and for the world as well, I would argue. And we need to do more to address the topic of mental illness. Now, whenever we get people who experience mental illnesses, we're inevitably going to get people who will stigmatize those people with mental illnesses. So we need to do something to stop that, right? I often hear that from people with mental illnesses say that, not everybody, but often, that the stigma that associates or accompanies mental illnesses is actually worse than the illness itself. Stigma works to distance, separate, discriminate, make less equal, make the person feel less deserving, less worthy. It works to separate so that people with mental illnesses don't get to participate in our community, in our society. So that is one of the major reasons why we need to reduce the stigma of mental illness. In addition, stigma of mental illness is one of the biggest barriers to stigma reduction. Now, approximately 50% of those who experience a mental illness in a given year will not seek help. And stigma is one of the biggest reasons why. They fear that seeking help will put a label on them, which will lead to people's negative attitudes towards them, will lead to unequal treatment, discrimination, discrimination within the healthcare system. Those are very real things that do happen, and we need to reduce stigma in that sense. But reducing stigma is, I think, even more than that. It will help increase help seeking, but if we reduce stigma, it has greater impact as well, broadly. So if we reduce the stigma of mental illness, for the individual, it will lead to probably earlier help seeking. It'll lead to more positive outcomes both physically and mentally, which has an effect on, for example, outcomes for the individual at work, so greater productivity, better grades, for example, better family life and social life. So those are some of the individual ramifications. If we extend that to the broader level, if we reduce the stigma of mental illness, it will lead to shifts in attitude and shifts in culture. Those are things that we're very important to look after. If we shift our culture, it will lead to more acceptance of mental health in general, as well as acceptance and welcoming people to seek help when they do need help. And I think that's very important. And one final thought is that if we reduce the stigma of mental illness, this will lead to those with mental illnesses having the same opportunities to participate in society, in the community, as people who don't have a mental illness. So I think that's a very, very important point. So in the past, I would say 5 years or so, I've been giving a lot of talks on the stigma of mental illness. And a lot of that content revolves around, for example, defining stigma. A lot of that content involves saying how bad stigma is, because it is, talking about things such as level of stigma. I've also talked about things such as the importance of why we should reduce stigma. So those are kind of the topics that I've been talking about in a lot of my talks. Now, I often get people coming up to me afterwards saying, well, how do I reduce stigma? I'm passionate about mental health. I want to do something. What can I do? And I do agree with their intent. And so I do agree that we do need to talk about stigma, but yet we need to take that step further and take action to reduce the stigma of mental illness. So in the time that we have remaining, what I'm going to do is talk about actual actions that we can take to reduce the stigma of mental illness. Okay, the helper's gone. I don't think I need a helper. I think I can do it. So you might be thinking, how I'm going to do that? Well, believe it or not, the eCrisp is that exact tool that will help you reduce the stigma of mental illness. Now, I don't know how revolutionary it is, but the eCrisp is that tool. So what it is, the eCrisp essentially is an acronym for 6 things that you can do to reduce the stigma of mental illness. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail for each of the 6 actions. E stands for educate. C stands for connect. R stands for reflect. I stands for include. S stands for support. And P stands for protest. eCrisp, okay? Educate. We know from so educate yourself on mental health. We know from the research literature that increasing your knowledge about mental health or mental health literacy, increasing your mental health literacy, is a very, very effective way of reducing stigma. So what I want you to do is to go out, educate yourself on mental illness, but what it is, what it isn't, because there are a lot of things it is and it isn't. There are a lot of resources out there, for example, at the university that can educate you on what mental illness is and is not. There are a lot of programming workshops, for example, that do that. A second thing I want you to educate yourself on are the resources that exist concerning mental health and wellness. You don't know when you're going to need it or when a friend or a colleague might need it. So for students, if you go to the SU Wellness website, there are a ton of mental health resources available for students. If you're faculty, staff, postdocs, there are a ton of resources on the Wellbeing and Work Life website at HR. As well, the Campus Mental Health Strategy website, ucalgary.ca/mental health. If you go to that website, you're going to see a lot of resources that can be direct you towards mental health and well-being. So educate yourself on mental health. connect. Engage in meaningful contact with a person with mental illness. Get to know somebody who has a mental illness, or if they're willing to. Have a chat with them, learn from them. We know from the research literature that contact is probably one of the single best ways to reduce the stigma of mental illness. Now, contact is a way to learn, is the way to understand, and to get to know that person, right? It creates that feeling of support and camaraderie. Now, to increase the effectiveness of contact, the contact situation should be meaningful, should be over time, as well. The context of that contact should be a sense of cooperation or collaboration versus rather than things such as competition. And finally, the context of that contact should be supported as well. So again, get to know somebody, connect. Reflect. Think about your own attitudes, beliefs, opinions, words, and behaviors. Okay? I think it's very, very important for you to reflect on your own attitudes and opinions, to reflect on your own words, your own behaviors concerning the topic of mental health and mental illness. Now, if we don't know our own thoughts and behaviors and attitudes and words, we can't stop them if they're stigmatizing. Now, one very simple way that I suggest for you is to think about the words that you use. We know words such as crazy, psycho, insane are very prevalent in our vocabulary. They're part of our vernacular, right? Now, what I don't want to say, don't use those words. I don't want to be the word police. What I want you to do is just think a little bit more about when you use those words, how you use those words, and to whom you use those words to. By thinking a little bit more about those, you get a sense of the possible impacts when you use those words that you might have towards others who are around you. Some of those people may have a mental illness, right? So again, reflect. Include. Be inclusive. I think being inclusive is so much easier than being exclusive. So here's where I tell you the casserole story. Manon Charbonneau is a psychiatrist, I think, out in Quebec. She has talked a lot about stigma, a lot about mental illness, and I'm recounting her story here. I might not have every single aspect correct, but in general, it is kind of what her experiences are. So Manon, she had a physical illness. I think it might have been cancer, and she had to go off work. So what she did, or what happened was, when she did go off work, she got a lot of cards, a lot of flowers. People offered to do things for her, such as shop or do errands. People made her food. People made her casseroles, right? She came back to work, she was well, and then sometime afterwards, she had to go off work again because she was experiencing depression. Now, this time around, she didn't get the flowers. She didn't get the cards. She didn't get those offers of help. Nobody made her casseroles, right? So it's so easy. It's easy to see that, all the things that could happen if we exclude. It's so much easier if we just, offer an invitation to, for example, if somebody's off for work for mental illness, to include them on things. Invite them to an event. Whether they come or not, that's not a problem, but include. Similarly, if somebody is returning to work for a mental illness, go up to them and say, hi, how are you doing? What's the worst that can happen, right? So it's so much easier to include rather than exclude. Support. Support those you're concerned about. I won't go too long into discussing this because there's a lot of good resources out there. I want to bring one up for you. If you're concerned about somebody who you think might be experiencing a mental illness or may be in distress. There are a lot of resources that you can access. And this is one of them. There's a companion one for students, but this is assisting a colleague in distress. This was just created, and it's full of resources that you can direct people to. But what I think is the most important part is the back here. These are 4 actions that you can do to help somebody who you think might be in distress. So these 4 actions are ask, support, refer, follow up. I won't get into those, but there are, just actually 2 days ago, we gave that workshop to a group of instructors that are going abroad. So there's, again, a lot of resources. If people do need support, don't be afraid to help them out. Finally, protest. Stand up when you see prejudice and discrimination. Now, when I say protest, you might think of placards and signs. One quick thing that pops up into my mind was the Women's March that happened 2 months ago or so when the president of a country that sits next to us was inaugurated. Sure, for sure you can do that kind of protest. But what I'm mostly referring to is protest interpersonally, or interpersonal protest. So if you see somebody engaging in prejudice or discrimination or stereotyping, well, first of all, I want you to not participate in that. But if you can, if it's okay to, challenge, stand up, challenge that discrimination or stigma. So for example, if somebody that or a peer or a colleague says, those people with depression, they're just lazy. They would just want to get out of work. Well, if it's okay to, challenge that. Say, no, I think you're wrong. That's not correct. That's a myth, right? People with depression it's a real illness. They might experience some cognitive deficits during that time that they experience depression. There are some other physiological things that are going on that prevent them from doing their work, for example. So if you see discrimination, if you see stigma, if you see prejudice, stand up, challenge it. So that's eCrisp. It's, again, not a very revolutionary tool, but it's a useful tool that I think people can take home with them to help them on their journey to reduce stigma. So at the very least, I hope you take away some things with you. For example, hopefully you can understand that stigma of mental illness is an important topic in our society, in our communities, and on this campus. And if I've done my work, hopefully you'll take this tool with you and engender you to do something about the stigma that exists surrounding mental illness on this campus and in our communities. So please call right now, order the eCrisp. You'll get your free gift of the campus mental health strategy. Please, supplies are limited, so please call now. Operators are standing by. Thank you.